Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. In this video, we'll continue with EIGRP. We're going to look at dynamic and static neighbors. So to backtrack, I've done an EIGRP live study session and now I'm breaking down those topics into shorter videos. Here's the summary of the topics that has been covered in the live study session. And I've already done classic and name mode in another video. So now we're continuing with the next bullet point, so dynamic and static neighbors. Related to that, we'll look at the multicast and unicast packets. I've actually started a Wireshark packet capture already, but we'll come back to that later. And here is also the configuration that has been done previously on R1 and R2. Let me show that quickly, so let me copy this handy command here. And then let's go on R1. Here's what we have on R1 and then on R2. R3 has not been configured, but we will use R3 to demonstrate the static neighbor configuration. Let's actually wake up R3 as well. So you can see there's nothing here at the moment. Again, we'll use Cisco documentation to look at the configuration. So let me actually go back to the web browser. Now in the previous video, I used this document. So the IP routing EIGRP configuration guide. This is the main page. And I had this document open in another tab over here. So this is the basic EIGRP configuration. Unfortunately, I was not able to find how to configure static neighbors in this document. So I've looked through the Cisco master command syntax as well. I quickly showed it here, this tab. So we'll have to use this as a reference. So before we actually jump to the EIGRP static neighbor configuration, let's go to Wireshark and look at the packet capture. So let me just pick one, it doesn't really matter. This hello packet, for example. Now what I want you to pay attention to is the IP header and look at the source and destination, or more specifically the destination IP address. So 224.0.0.10. So this is a multicast IP address. So right now the hello packets are sent as multicast packets in both directions. So it doesn't matter if I change the source address from 192.168.255.1 or .2. So whether it's coming from R1 or R2, it doesn't matter. It's going to the same multicast IP address. 224.0.0.10. Now keep that in mind. Okay, we can close this. Now let's go back to the command reference. So let's break down the command syntax here. So this is how you define a static EIGRP neighbor. So you start with the neighbor command, then the IP address or IP version 6 address, but we're doing IPv4. And then you have to specify the interface type and number. That's really it. It's not more complicated than that. You do have a couple of optional parameters here, but we'll leave those out. Now, if we scroll down a little bit, there's a section called Usage Guidelines. This is a nice reference. So here you can actually see configuration examples for both EIGRP Classic mode and EIGRP named mode. So we'll configure EIGRP static neighbors between R1 and R3. Okay, let's pull up Notepad. So for Classic mode, let me just do a whole nother section here. So router EIGRP will maintain the same autonomous system number, and then neighbor 192.168.255.3, that's R3. And then we need to specify the interface, and it's gigabit Ethernet 0/0. like so. That's in classic mode. Now before I paste that in on R1, let's have the named mode configuration ready for R3 as well. So let's go back to the command reference. So here you can see the syntax. Really, it's not any different except that it's done under the address family configuration. Okay, then back to Notepad. And let's do another section here. So router, EIGRP. And let me do poison here. Name, an instance name kind of in the same category as venom. Very beautiful and happy words. Then address family. IPv4. Unicast. Autonomous system number and 12. And then neighbor 192.168.255.1 and the exit interface, or the interface where the neighbor is connected, gigabit Ethernet 0/0. Now before I paste this in, let's think about what's going to happen. And this is something important you need to remember about static neighbors. So when you configure EIGRP static neighbors, it basically disables multicast on the interface. EIGRP will no longer process multicast packets. It will not send or receive multicast packets. If we go back to our topology over here, what does that imply? What's going to happen? So right now R1 and R2 are EIGRP neighbors, dynamic neighbors, and they are using multicast. So as soon as we configure R1 and R3 as static neighbors, the multicast capability is gone. As a result, R1 and R2 will no longer be EIGRP neighbors. Let's see that happen. So let's copy paste the configuration on R1 first. So let's go back to Notepad. Over here. So copy paste this. And actually let's do show IP EIGRP neighbor. So you see R2 is listed here. Now, let's paste this. And let's see what happens. Instantly, we get this message. Neighbor 192.168.255.2, that's R2, is down. Static peer configured. So if we run the show IP EIGRP neighbor command again, you see that we have nothing here. Well, this is because we haven't configured the other side yet. So there's nothing on R3. So that's why they haven't discovered each other yet. Let's do that now. So we'll copy this configuration. And then go on R3. And then configuration mode. Like so. And let's wait a few moments. Nothing is happening. Why is that? That's because EIGRP is not actually enabled on R3 yet. So if we go back to Notepad, you see that I haven't actually configured the network command. So that is still required to enable EIGRP. So the full configuration should be like this. All right, let's go and copy paste that here. Voila, instantly the EIGRP adjacency comes up, as seen here. Okay, let's do show IP EIGRP neighbor. You can see R1 is now there. And if we copy this and go on R1 side, R3 is here. And now R2 should have nothing. Let's try this. Exactly. There's no output for this command. Finally, let's go back to Wireshark. As you can see, there's a lot of hello messages here. Let me just stop the packet capture so we don't have to scroll around in the document. And this is actually pretty cool. The packets are color coded. So if we look at this one here, for example, now again in the IP header, the source and destination address, look at this one. This is now a unicast address. So this is a unicast hello packet from R1 to R3. And notice here, R2 is still trying to send those multicast packets. But once again, R1 is not accepting those, and that's why they will not establish an EIGRP neighborship. Now finally, let's look at the running configuration and see what we've configured. So let's pull it up from here, this very nice command. So on R1, this is what we have. Still quite simple configuration, only the network and neighbor commands. And then on R3. So one key thing to remember here, you need both commands for static neighbors. So the neighbor command specifies the static neighbor, and the network command enables EIGRP. So that's how you configure EIGRP static neighbors. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.